Hello, my name is Eitan Ben David on Judaism and philosophy, and this time about Maimonides, the Rambam, his life, his main works, and why I love him so much. The Rambam was born in the year 1135 or 1138, we're not fully sure, in Cordova, in Spain. It was the end of the golden era of Judaism in Spain under the Muslim rule, the golden era which had brought forth people like Rabbi Yehuda Levi, Rabbi Avraham ibn Ezra, and others. The Rambam has had elite education on one hand of Judaism contents and on the other hand of sciences, philosophy, and medicine, which he will practice later on in his life. In early age, he was seen as a promise, as a great talent, also coming up with his first essay called Words of Logic, which is essentially a summary of logics by Aristotle. It is short on one hand, but it is already showing the great ability of Maimonides to take a very vast topic, find its main principles, and put them down in a very orderly and understandable manner. Now, this golden era of Judaism in Spain has ended abruptly when the Al-Muwahhidun, Almohads, which were more fundamentalist Muslim tribes, have invaded into Spain. As part of their reforms, they basically told the Christians and the Jews, who up until then had protection from the government, guys, either you convert to Islam or you have to leave Spain. And so the Rambam and his family are forced to leave Spain and going over and move in a period of several years, wandering around in northern Africa and several countries, reaching Israel for a short while before finally settling in Fustat, which is near Cairo in Egypt. During those difficult years, the Rambam has written his first masterpiece, Commentary on the Mishnah. What is the Mishnah? So, the Jewish traditional view is that Moses has received from divinity the set of written laws that we know as Torah, part of the Bible. But in parallel, he had received from the same source a set of oral laws. And those laws were passed from generation to generation, father to his children, teacher to his pupils. And those laws were forbidden it was forbidden to put them in writing. And that was the case until around the year 200, after the failure of the second rebellion against the Roman Empire. Rabbi Yehuda understands that we are now in a crisis mode, exile. We can no longer trust this chain. And in order to preserve the text, the contents, they must be put in writing. So this is the Mishnah. The word comes from the Hebrew term for both studying, learning, and repeating, which makes, of course, a lot of sense. Now, the book is important as its own. It is, by the way, written in Arabic, written in Hebrew letters. It is mainly important, though, because what the Rambam is doing in 2 points in the overall discussions. There are 2 points in which he said, I'm about to dive into an important topic which requires an introduction. The first introduction is the introduction to Pirkei Avot, which is a part of the Mishnah mainly dealing with ethics. So the Rambam is saying ethics is something which is exercised by the soul, by the mind. But before I want to talk about ethics, let's talk about the mind or the soul. And he sets out to define the faculties, the abilities, we would say, of the soul, the importance of choice, the freedom of choice, building out a character of a person which is interested in the truth, regardless of who said it. He coins an important term. In Arabic, it goes like Isma el-Haq min Kala, which roughly translates to listen to the truth or heed to the truth, regardless of who told it. We're interested in the truth. Another important part of the introduction is the Rambam's version to the golden rule of Aristotle. When Aristotle discusses in his ethics about what should I be doing in certain situations, what he proposes is to take each trait and to treat it as a continuum. And this continuum has 2 extremes, which I should avoid. So I don't want to be spending too much money. I don't want to be very cheap. I need to be somewhere in the middle, and this is called being generous. In the battle, I don't want to be a coward. I also don't want to rush forward toward any danger. I need to be in the middle, and this is called being brave. The Rambam embraces this model, but comes up with two exceptions for it. One exception regards being humble. You have to be as humble as possible. Ego is not good, because ego would disturb you from actually being able to see the truth, because you would typically want to show that you were right to begin with. When you have less ego, you are more open to see the truth. The other exception is about anger. You have to never be actually angry. Sometimes you have to be seen as if you're angry, especially when you're shouting at your little girl not to jump into the road, right? You have to scream at her so that she understands not to do that. You cannot start explaining basic Newtonian physics to her. Sometimes you have to be angry when you are a parent and when you are a ruler of a country. The people need to have some level of fear from you, from the law, in order to be good citizens. But those are occasions where we need to be seen as angry. We never be really, really mad. Why is that important? Again, because when you are mad, you are losing your sound judgment. And that is a very important thing in Maimonides' view. The second introduction that the Rambam includes in Perusha Mishnah is the introduction to Perek Chelek, the chapter that deals with the statement that all of Israel have a share or a part in the next world, the Ha'olam Haba. And kind of, he stops the discussion, says, I really have to stop here because people are talking about lots of different things when they are talking about Ha'olam Haba. Is it about the good guys in heaven, in paradise, enjoying life, drinking wine and honey and so on? Maybe. Is that the people of Israel ruling the world without anyone being on top of them? Is it about the dead being resurrected and so on and so forth? There are people who believe in each of those things. Most of the people, the Rambam is saying, are believing in everything together, but no one really stops and think, what is the purpose of this whole thing? What is the goal? What do we actually need to do? Now, at this point, the Rambam goes on to show the parable of the teacher. Imagine a young boy, let's say the age of probably 3, 4, 5, coming to the teacher. Looking from the outside, the Rambam says, we know that the best thing for this kid is to study in order to know the truth, right? But the kid is not really interested in any of this. So what the teacher has done is playing a little trick. Let's do the following, he says to the kid. You come to me and teach, and I give you some candy in an ongoing manner. And the kid is happily doing the thing that he doesn't really like, studying, in order to get the important thing for him, which is the candy. Now, what we have done is actually switching between the actual purpose and the means for that purpose. The purpose is for him to study, but we're giving him the means, the candy, in order to push him towards that purpose, because he cannot value this actual goal at this point. And the years go by, he doesn't really go for candies too much anymore, and then we just switch the means. We're saying, okay, you come and study with me, and I will give you nice clothes, and later maybe money. And later when he grows up even more, we will tell him, you should study so that you are being called a rabbi, and people get up when you step into the synagogue and honor you, and so on and so forth. And very few people, the Rambam concludes, would understand that the actual goal all along was not the candy and not the clothes, not the money and not the respect and honor that you will get. The important thing is just to study, to know the truth. And what I personally really like is that the Rambam is stopping there and continues the discussion. He doesn't say, remember what we just discussed about the afterlife and so on. So you should really understand what went on here and apply it to our discussion. Doesn't do it. He leaves that to the reader. In any case, he also proceeds to discuss his main principles of Judaism. So he proposes 13 main principles, which would include, for example, God having no physical body, perhaps the only revolution of the Rambam which has actually succeeded, making the people understand why God cannot have a physical body, and also some additional principles which were then, from that point on, widely accepted as the main principles of Judaism. The Rambam would then embark on his second masterpiece, Mishneh Torah. In order to understand Mishneh Torah, we first need to talk a bit about the Talmud, the Gemara. So we talked a bit about the Mishnah. In the following generations, up until, let's say, the year 600, more or less, we have many sages discussing, studying the Mishnah. Some of them are in Israel, some of them are abroad in Babylon. They no longer speak Hebrew all that much, because now the lingua franca, the language being spoken around, is Aramaic. And there are lots of discussions about the terms being used in the Mishnah. Why is one sage saying that and the others say something different, and so on and so on. And those are kind of, on one hand, protocols of the sages talking with each other, trying to solve some difficulties that they see, sometimes switching over to some stories with a lesson learned, which sometimes is very clear, sometimes it is not really so. The text is jumping from one thing to the next, and it is not always clear, or better said, almost always not really clear. Okay, what needs actually to be done? What is the actual decision here? So we come up with what's called the C of Talmud, which is seen as an important thing for everyone to learn, but it is vast and very, very difficult to really understand and pin out, okay, what actually needs to be done if I want to be a good Jew? What are the actual things that I need to do in my everyday life? And so the Rambam sets out to do the impossible, to take this whole thing, the Sea of Talmud. You can take a look right here. So all these books, and it goes also inside the shelves, and coming up with one book that has this size, quite small relatively, right? As clear as possible, written in plain Hebrew, which is pretty much well understood today. As I always say, if you take Hebrew writings from about 100 years ago and take a random page from the Mishneh Torah, I guarantee that the text in Mishneh Torah would be clearer. It's written in effortless, lucid way, which is really impossible to imitate. And Rambam is saying, I'm writing this so that everyone can learn from it, not people who are experts in any way. It's written in a language that they can understand, and all you have to do at the end of the day would be to read the Bible and to read my book, and that's it. You already have a perfect understanding of what needs to be done by you, what are the mitzvot, the things that you should do, and also the proper way to look at the world. What the Rambam is doing would be considered perhaps incredible when we think about it today. He starts the discussion with an overview of the scientific perspectives of how the world is built in terms of astronomy, of physics, and so on. His approach to sciences is something that would only help us be better Jews, to be better religious people, because at the end of the day, this is the truth. In order to really appreciate God, you need to look at the nature, to look what He has done, to look how immensely clever everything is, study the laws of nature. Spending time, as much time to sciences as to study the Torah, is what you should be doing. The same amount of time, of effort, should be spent on studying each. This is definitely a revolutionary idea for the time and today. Of course, this has raised lots of criticism against Maimonides from the moment this book was published. The Rambam makes it very clear that he is not interested in saying, okay, and this thing was the idea of Rabbi such and such, or the sages know this and that. He makes it very clear that his purpose is just to provide the final word, which has basically had no chance to work, because Immediately there were books written on, hey, let's find out on each decision that the Rambam was making, what were his sources. Also, interestingly, very much against the common faith or common beliefs of the folk, as you would say. So one thing that I've mentioned is his strong fight against the notion that God has a body, which today would seem obvious to us, but this is because the revolution of Maimonides has actually worked, but probably only here. He's also very much against beliefs, for example, in ghosts and demons, which is something that you would find quite a lot in the Talmud, in the Gemara. And the ideas of you must have the faith of basically a mature and responsible person, less stories of coming from your grandmother, and more focusing on science and real understanding in order to reach the proper relationship with God. Obviously, not something that can go by without lots of criticisms on it. It took the Rambam quite a bit before he could provide us with his third and last masterpiece, Guide for the Perplexed. And the reason for this delay was the tragic death of his brother David. The two brothers, David and Moshe, had a very nice arrangement. David was the one in charge of providing the income, and Moshe was in charge of sitting down and writing his masterpieces. But being a merchant on that at that period of time had its dangers, and David died in one of his journeys in the ocean near India. And the Rambam describes in his letters how horrible it was for him. He describes that it took him about a year to just be able to get out of bed. Clearly, he was in a very severe form of a depression, and it takes a while to figure out what he should be doing now. One thing that the Rambam always refused to do was to take money on teaching Judaism and so on. So he had to come up with something else. And this something else was, again, back to his years of study. We mentioned that he studied medicine at the time. This was the time to start actually practicing it. And since we're talking about the Rambam, it didn't take a long time before he was widely considered the best doctor around, being the doctor of the throne of the court in Cairo. The court of whom? So we have Saladin, at the same time wrestling along with the Crusaders around the Middle East. So Saladin was running around with his wars, and in parallel, Maimonides is basically in the court, basically treating everyone else. He describes in his letters how hard he is working, basically reaching his home late at night, and then obviously the people around go to him because he is the best doctor around. And over time, this is really very sad to see. He gets kind of his energies are dropping over time. He's not as young as he were, and so on. He gets sick more often and often, and it is quite a sad thing, honestly, to see in his letters. In any case, we do have this third masterpiece, Guide for the Perplexed, and in my own perspective, probably the best book ever written. First, the target audience could not have been more different than the target audience of Mishneh Torah. The Rambam says, as far as I'm concerned, I have absolutely no problem if only one person out of 10,000 that read the book would actually, it would be intended for him. I'm quite fine with it. The target audience are people who on one side have studied Judaism and on the other hand have studied sciences, philosophy, and they are perplexed because it seems to them that they do not fit together. For example, taking the issue of whether God has a body or not, it is quite common to find indications in the Bible that God does have a body on a basic reading. However, Aristotle teaches us, and as far as Maimonides is concerned, this is a fact just as it is a fact that a triangle has 180 degrees, that God cannot have a body. So which way should we go? Does it have a body? Does it not? The Rambam says the purpose of this book is to show these people that actually we're talking about two truths here. And one truth cannot really contradict another. We just need to think better about the things in order to understand that actually they can definitely live together. Not only that they will not battle each other or contradict each other, as we saw in the Mishneh Torah, being a better scientist, being a better philosopher, it was pretty much the same at that time, would only lead you to be a better Jewish person, to be a better person as a whole, actually. The manner in which the discussions are laid out could not, again, be more different than what it is in Mishneh Torah. In Mishneh Torah, everything is very concise, very clear, while in the guide for the perplexed, the Rambam is saying explicitly, you cannot expect me on any important issue to start and end the discussion in one place. I want things to be not fully clear to everyone, because people who don't read it really in depth will just get the wrong ideas. There is a process that the reader must go through in order to really understand what I'm really thinking in some cases, or in other cases, there are several options which would be legitimate, but he wants the reader to undergo a process. And therefore he's saying, any important topic which I have, the discussion, part of it would be here, another part of it would be in a very different chapter, while dealing with seemingly a totally different idea, a totally different topic. I would put there a hint that would show what is the proper view on the topic that is written in another location. And the proper way to be reading this book is to basically just put together this great puzzle that he's building, the great jigsaw puzzle. And this, of course, method that is explicitly written, this is how my book is written, that obviously has always sparked the imagination of people in the 830, 40 years or so since it was written, including myself. Following the guide for the perplexed, the Rambam only writes essays about medicine. But what I really, really like is going over the letters that he has written, both in that period and before. This is what allows you to actually see the actual person in some cases. And I would like to focus on one letter, the letter to Obadiah, the convert. He converted to Judaism. We don't have his letter, but we understand from the answer that the Rambam wrote to him that Obadiah was very frustrated, because his rabbi was basically reminded him over and over again that he came he wasn't a Jew to begin with, and he can't really say in the prayer like everyone else, God, our God, and the God of our fathers, because your fathers, who knows what they have worshipped, and so on and so forth. And the Rambam really gets out of his way in writing a lengthy answer, providing first understanding what is the emotional state of the person who wrote him this letter. And he was a very common folk, this Obadiah. He was not any kind of an important person, so to speak. The Rambam takes his time to write an answer. That kind of answers everything he needed, both emotionally encouraging him that he's taking the right step, and telling him how wrong his rabbi was, telling him those things. And this ability to understand the person in front of you who's writing this letter, what he actually needs, even though he's not an important person in any way, this is really something which I find quite breathtaking. So to sum up, the Rambam was really a very unique figure, which I like in so many levels, both in terms of the issues he had to face during his lifetime. He also had a role in the Jewish community, suffering from some political debates here and there. But really, seeing that person who actually, he actually lived, is not wrapped in myth like many other important figures in human history. I feel I can really understand his mind and what went on him, and that is really something which I cherish very much. So the model of Judaism that he is putting, the model of how a person should behave, what a person should do, The fact that he provides a model in which you have to be 360 degrees. You need to be interested in science, in truth, in religion, everything together. Everything is important. Keeping in mind the people that you talk to, that forms, in my view, the most full image of a very unique person that I've ever seen. And I hope that this allowed also to you to feel just a bit who the Rambam was and why I love him so much.